Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the world's oldest texts to uncover a hidden message, one that suggests it's not just a story about beginnings, but actually a blueprint for how everything is meant to work.
So let's start with this big question. Is Genesis just about how things got started? Or is it telling us something deeper about how life is supposed to function, right here and now? The source we're exploring today argues for the second one, that Genesis is really a set of instructions for life itself.
Okay, so let's get right to the core idea. The argument is that Genesis isn't just a list of things God made, it's revealing a fundamental principle, that everything in creation is designed to be in constant, purposeful motion. It has to move.
So what does this divine blueprint actually look like? Well, to get it, you have to stop thinking of the world of Genesis as a static painting and start seeing it as a collection of perfectly functioning, dynamic systems all in motion.
The source gives this a name, divine order. It's the idea that everything has a place, a purpose, a time to act, and, importantly, a time to stop. In this model, standing still, or stagnation, is what's unnatural. That constant, healthy movement, that's the default state for everything.
And you can really see this idea in action here. It's not just the big cosmic stuff, like day and night or the changing seasons. It goes all the way down to the most basic things. Rivers are meant to flow, and the very breath in our lungs is meant to move. Everything is designed to be part of a constant cycle.
So if everything is designed to be in constant flow, what happens when that rhythm gets interrupted? This is where the source identifies a really critical pattern.
And this brings us to the main problem, what the source calls retention. Now, this isn't just about, say, a dam blocking a river. It's a spiritual and metaphorical idea. It's the act of holding on to something, an attitude, a sin, a habit, long after its season has passed. And when you do that, you block the natural flow.
And this chart just illustrates the biblical logic perfectly. On one side, you have actions of release, of flow being restored, like Joseph forgiving his brothers, and that leads to life. On the other side, you've got blockage, or retention, Pharaoh hardening his heart, Sodom refusing to let go of sin, and that consistently leads to judgment and destruction.
But here's what's really dangerous. The consequences of this blockage don't always show up right away, and that delay can create this false and ultimately destructive feeling that everything's okay.
The story of Cain is the perfect example. You have the horrific act, but then silence. A long period where Cain builds a city, has a family. It seems like he got away with it, but the source argues that the consequence was just growing silently, gathering power, until the final result was realized. His lineage gets completely cut off. So a delay in the consequence doesn't mean it went away.
And importantly, the source emphasizes that a total collapse never just comes out of nowhere. The argument is that God always sends a warning first, to Cain, to Noah's generation, to Pharaoh, and these warnings aren't supposed to be threats. They're seen as acts of mercy, an opportunity to restore the flow before it's too late.
So, when you're faced with one of these blockages, how do you fix it? Well, the source points out that our typical human reaction is often common, but deeply flawed. It really comes down to straining versus aligning. Straining is when you try to force a result, to go against the grain. Think of Cain trying to force God's approval, or the Tower of Babel trying to build a shortcut to heaven. Aligning, on the other hand, is about course-correcting back to the original design, like Noah simply following instructions to build the ark. It's the difference between brute force and simple obedience. So, if straining is the wrong way to go, what is the right way? How do you unblock the system and get that divine flow moving again? What's so fascinating is that the solution is almost never some big, complicated, dramatic gesture. Throughout Genesis, restoration comes from simple, precise, obedient actions. It's not about drama, it's about doing the right small thing at the right time. And this path to restoration is really a simple three-step process. First, you have to discern, figure out what needs to be released. Second, you obey. You take that specific action to release it. And third, you allow restoration. You just trust that once the blockage is gone, the natural flow will come back all on its own. And this idea of release applies to so much more than just physical stuff. The source extends this to our internal lives. We can hold on to sin, sure, but we can also retain trauma, pride, or fear. Even old habits that used to be good for us can become blockages if we hang on to them past their season. The source argues that just like the earth showed its corruption in Noah's time, our own bodies act as witnesses. Things like fatigue, discomfort, or that general feeling of heaviness, they're not seen as punishments, but as signals. They're indicators that one of your internal systems is out of alignment with its intended rhythm.
And this all brings us to the powerful conclusion of the entire argument. It's a simple but incredibly profound statement that really sums up this whole worldview.
So ultimately, the big takeaway is this. Maintaining a healthy spiritual life isn't a passive state. It actually requires our active participation in this cosmic cycle of letting go, of releasing, so that we can constantly stay aligned with the intended flow of the Creator.
And that leaves us with a final and pretty challenging question. If this really is a spiritual law, then what are we holding on to? What in our own lives has already served its purpose, but is still being kept, imprisoned, when it was actually designed to flow?